Well, Razorback fans, it's game week. It's like actually game week. So let's actually talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Inside Arkansas Live, which you can catch every weekday starting at noon on Inside Arkansas and InsideArkansas.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Ultimate College Football HC, which is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free bonus for your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. Hope everybody's having a wonderful or had a wonderful weekend as we are officially in game week. Now, it's a little bit different because we know it's a Thursday game, and so that kind of throws everything off. But I'll tell you this, just watching some of the week 0 matchups and some of those games in college football over the weekend, it just got me all excited again. It was I won't say it was pathetic, but it kind of was pathetic of just how much college football I watched. Like, I watched every game. And even the games that didn't matter, even the games that no one really cared about, I still watch them. And it's just because the excitement is there. And I've already been excited for Razorback football season to an extent. But after the weekend, now I'm even more pumped. I'm going to be going down to Little Rock and watching the game from War Memorial Stadium against UAPB. Hopefully it ends up being a decent weather game, not too hot. Hopefully it ends up being at least a decent experience, unlike last year. But, it's just funny where we get to this point. We get to this point each and every year where it is game week. And game week always means something more. Now, of course it means something more because it's like, oh, well, less than a week. It's going to be going on. Or, this is time where it's getting down to the nitty gritty. It's like, yeah. But from my perspective, just because of the amount of times that we've heard from Sam Pittman, that we've heard from coaches, which we will a little bit here this week, there's no more talking. There's nothing now that can be said, that can be done, that can be guessed, that can be assumed, that can be anything barring any major injury, which, knock on wood, hopefully that doesn't happen. But there's nothing that can be done anymore to change anyone's mind. Whatever the feeling of the season is for everybody and for all the fans right now, it's going to remain that, and it's not going to change. And to me, I love it. I love that it's back to it's now here. Because I'll be honest, folks, this is what I do for a living. Okay, I talk about the Razorbacks for a living. I'm very fortunate and I'm very blessed to be able to do what I do. There's no question about that. I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky. But even I come to a point where I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of talking about what could happen or might happen or predicting things that you all so lovingly let me know that if I'm wrong or right or, you want me to hear about how stupid I am or whatever it is, which I get down for. It's fine. But I get tired of it. I get tired of thinking about all the different things that's going to be going on. But we'll have some final podcast here as we will talk about a few things heading into this week. But the thing is that right now is when you're probably going to be your most optimistic, is right now. Now, during the season, if you start to win a bunch of games and you start off really strong, then that optimism will go up even further. But I'm talking about the general part of the season, the general feeling that you have or you don't have is going to be right here, right now. And for me, for Arkansas, I'm optimistic. I mean, I did my overall season predictions on Inside Arkansas, and I had Arkansas going 7-5. And I'll probably talk about that as I get closer to the game here on this podcast too. And I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility. I don't think it's a stretch to think that, but I also understand why people are more pessimistic or realistic, depending on which viewpoint you look at it from. But overall, this is the time where you just got to be thankful that you have football and thankful that you have something to look forward to. Because I think after the COVID year, when all that happened, I swore to myself that I would never take it for granted again. Take for granted not only having football and college football and just college sports in general, but going to them. Because I remember that time when you could only have 30% capacity, which was just, it was just such a ridiculous thing. And looking back on it, you could only have 30%. You could only do these amount of things. And then the students, I always think about the students and being in the student section, how they were basically had that taken away from them, that experience and what that was like. And, the tailgating and all of that. And so when all that happened just a few years ago, I swore to myself that I would never take it for granted again. It could be so much different. And I know a lot of you are going to go down to a game in Little Rock and you're going to enjoy yourself. But there are a lot of people that are not going because they don't care, because they're just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to deal with that. Or there are some people that are going, but are not going to be happy about it, or just whatever. To me, I'm always looking at it where it's like, hey, if I get to go to a game, I'm going to take advantage of it. If I have an opportunity to go to a game, go to a matchup, I'm going to do it every time. And it's going to be the same thing in Little Rock where, yeah, it's UAPB. It's not like an opponent that's just going to wow you completely. Yeah, it's a Thursday night game, which is not ideal for a lot of people who have jobs and work for a living and everything. Yeah, I get that. But to me, this is about just an understanding that, hey, we get to watch Razorback football. We get to see football. We get to see a game. We get to go to a game. We get to be around a bunch of Razorback fans. And, there's not a lot of those opportunities that are able to be had. And because if you think about it, when you play this game against UAPB, and then you play Oklahoma State on the road, and then you play UAB, just those three games right there, season's 25% over. And it'll go like that. So all I'm saying is, folks, is that you don't have to have optimism for the win-loss record for Arkansas. You don't. You don't have to sit here and be an over-the-top, optimistic fanboy homer or whatever to consider yourself excited for the season. You can be excited. You can be excited about the mystery. Because there is mystery. There is a lot of mystery. There's a lot of uncertainty about this team that you could be wrong about if you're pessimistic about. If you think this team is going to go 5-7, you could be wrong. They could be better. If you think this defense is going to be bad, you could be wrong. They could be better. And one thing that I will always feel like, as far as fans go, and as far as people who have feelings about the season and predictions and everything like that, we never like being wrong. But that's the only time that we are always going to be okay with being wrong. That we're going to feel good about being wrong. That we will gladly admit that we were wrong. Is when our teams end up doing better than what we thought. So do get excited, folks. It's another year of football. Get to see the Razorbacks. Get to see the team run out there on the field with the Razorback red jerseys and the Razorback red helmets. You get to see the band and the cheerleaders and get to see Tusk driving around and everything. Even if you don't feel good about that, feel good about the pomp and circumstance, the pageantry and the tradition. Because that alone is worthy enough to get you excited. Let's be honest, we're here in the state of Arkansas. We don't have a lot. Well, what we do have, though, is the Razorbacks. And because of that, we're always going to be enjoying our time in those stadiums watching the Hogs play. We'll talk about a player that hasn't been talked about. Because I started thinking about this, and it made me kind of start, not changing my mind, but start thinking a little bit differently. But we'll talk about that here in just a second, so stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, folks, here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, I got to tell you about the newest mobile game that you all have to check out. All right? It's Ultimate College Football HC. It's an amazing game, all right? Because we have talked about how much we love college football, right? Well, it's a game and a simulation that gets you to step in the shoes of a head coach and leading your college football team to glory. Can you imagine actually being a head coach of the Razorbacks? Well, here's your chance. You think you can do better than Sam Pittman? Here's your chance to prove it. From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure is the ultimate question. And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your college football season, but will also shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And, of course, we have a special offer for all you Locked On Razorbacks fans. Use a promo code Locked On College Football, or Locked On CFB, I should say. Locked On CFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost for your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, and it will get you off to a very strong start. So download the game today, and just by visiting ultimate-cfb.com, or you can look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. So I've gone through this roster, man. I've gone through this roster. I've gone through the depth chart. I've gone through all the players and talking about the guys that I like. I've talked about Taylor Green nonstop. I feel like I've talked about Jaquindon Jackson a ton. I feel like I've talked about Andrew Armstrong, Luke Haz, Lana Jackson. You know, there's just a lot of players that have been talked about a lot. Well, I started thinking about this question because I like to look back upon my preseason things before the season started previous years. And, you know, I kind of go through a lot of the same things that we all do. You know, we talk about, all right, well, who's going to be the best player here? Who's going to be the best player here? And who's going to do this? And who's going to be awesome at this? And, you know, who's going to be the guy that is the game changer, the X factor, whatever. But one thing that I always am really fascinated about that I always look back upon is the times that I never mention a player that actually ends up being impactful. Like, happens every year. And it's not because of I don't think that they're any good. It's just because this may not be getting talked about a lot. And so I'm going to try to start doing that every year and for every sport where I'm like, what player have I not really talked about at all that I can kind of throw in at the last minute and say, hey, this guy's going to be really good because no one's talking about him. So here's my guy. Here's the person I'm going to talk about. Brace yourselves. I'm sure all of you are going to be so shocked. Isaac TeSlaa. You all, like, is a name you know all about him. You know his name. You know who he is. You know where he came from. You know what his story's about. But the thing is that this year, in this offseason in particular, this fall camp, this spring, I haven't really heard much of him. Sure, you've heard about Andrew Armstrong. You've heard about Tyrone Broden, Isaiah Satania. You know, you've heard about a few of the wide receivers out there that Taylor Green's throwing the ball to. But one guy that I haven't heard much about has been Isaac TeSlaa. Now, some of you are probably going to be like, well, there must be the reason you haven't heard about him because he's not any good. Or the reason you haven't heard about him because the coaches aren't talking about him and he's not any good. And I'm like, you know what? I guess we'll have to find out this season. We'll have to see what he can do. He's still on the team. But I'm going to go with that being my pick for the player that hasn't really been talked about a whole lot. I mean, for crying out loud, I think Monty Harrison, the MLB player, has been talked about more than Isaac TeSlaa. And with Petrino's offenses, you know, the quarterbacks have certain players or certain wide receivers that they trust more, that they like more, have better rapport with. It's just how it is. Because I always felt like Ryan Mallett, for instance, rest in peace. He would be a guy that in 2010 especially, Greg Childs was his dude. Like, yeah, he threw it to Joe Adams and Jarius Wright and all that, but Greg Childs and him really just clicked. Because Greg, up until the time, I think it was the Vanderbilt game when he got hurt for the rest of the year and was never really able to bounce back as much. he was the go-to wide receiver. But then the next year, you had Jarius Wright being the guy for Tyler Wilson. Jarius Wright had over 1,000 yards receiving that season. And, then you had Kobe Hamilton after that. But then, you fast forward to some other quarterbacks and who they went with and who were their targets and everything. My point is that every quarterback has different players, different wide receivers, different targets that they feel the most comfortable with, that they build a rapport with, and that those are usually the guys that are going to stand out and flex and have a great connection with. Is Isaac TeSlaa going to be that for Taylon Green? I don't know. I know Andrew Armstrong's really good, but is he going to be the number one wide receiver that gets the majority of the yards and catches? I don't know. Like, you have 3, I think, possibly 4 wide receivers that could end up carrying the team as far as the receiving yards go and everything else goes. So that's my vote. I'm going with Isaac TeSlaa. Sure, none of y'all will hold it against me, right? No, not at all. Not at all. But, there's some other ones I thought about. Make some honorable mentions. I thought about a Cam Ball, defensive lineman that did play last year and was able to make some plays last year, but I don't feel like he's really been talked about a whole lot. Also about Ty Washington, too. That's another player that I feel like just only shows up to just make plays. Shows up to make plays, and he got hurt, which is unfortunate, but man, he was when he's playing, he's really good. And even Bobby Petrino mentioned him by name, saying he was really impressed by him. So yeah, I just think it's a really fascinating thing to see about some of the players that you're not thinking about now, but you're going to have to get to know, and you're going to have to hear their name a lot because they're going to have a big year. We'll talk about being just 3 days away from Razorback football here on the other side of the break. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Well, folks, we know that we are always on the go, and I can tell you about our new sponsor here that's really going to help you continue to stay on the go, and that is 5 Hour Energy. Listen, if you're listening to this podcast and it's right after lunch and you're getting tired, well, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit a wall after lunch. So let 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. You can also do it like what I do before my workout. I want to get into shape, but I'm having trouble stay motivated there in the gym and stay there and make sure you get all your reps done and everything. Well, 5 Hour Energy shots, part of your lifestyle, and get the energy boost that you need to get fit. We also know sometimes you don't want to go to a gym, but when you take that 5 Hour Energy shot, it gives you that feeling and alertness that you can get over to the gym and get it done. With 0 sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There is a flavor for everyone, and you got to try them all because they're all really incredible. On the site, you even have an option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You can choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. So if you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy products today. You can even use my promo code, LOCKEDONCFB, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. Code is not good on subscription orders. So go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, moving on into the final segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. A lot of you have enjoyed this. Hopefully you have, where I've just kind of been doing a countdown for different players or different numbers or whatever it could be. And since we are 3 days away, I've always asked the question to you, when you think of the number 3 in Razorback sports, who's the first person you think of? Well, I got 2, and they're pretty obvious, and I'm sure a lot of you will probably be thinking of the same ones. I'll start with Joe Adams because he's the one that, I, for whatever reason, comes to mind first. It's not saying he's better or whatever than the other player we're going to talk about, but he's the one that comes to mind first. Joe Adams, the greatest punt returner that ever existed in Razorback history. In fact, some would argue even the last great punt returner in college football history, because punt returns don't seem to happen very often anymore. Like in 2011, he had 4 punt returns for a touchdown. Think about that. 4. If your team gets 1 in a season, it's a pretty big deal. But Joe Adams had 4. Of course, one of the most iconic and legendary. One of the best punt returns in college football history against Tennessee is still one of the coolest things. But having that, and then of course in the Kansas State game in the end of the season in the Cotton Bowl, he was just notorious for that. And so even though he was phenomenal for being a phenomenal punt returner, he also was really great, of course, as a wide receiver. He was just the guy that you get the ball in his hands no matter where he's on the field, and he's going to go make a play. This is what he does, and he's what he's good at. And he was really good at that. So Joe definitely is the one that comes to my mind first. But again, the other number 3, and I think you could make the argument for being the greatest number 3 to ever be at Arkansas, is, of course, the late, great Alex Collins. Rest in peace. Sometimes it's hard to imagine that, like, how tough that was in that year to have Ryan Mallett pass and Chris Smith pass and even Alex Collins pass in just really sad ways. But, Alex Collins, sometimes I forget he wore number 3, but, Buddha, as they called him, as his nickname was, one of very, very, very few running backs in SEC history to rush for 1,000 yards in all 3 seasons. Darren McFadden was one. Herschel Walker was another. I think Derrick Henry was the other. Just does not happen that often. The fact that 2 Razorbacks were there and the fact that Alex Collins was there, it really just shows how underrated he was. And here's the thing. It's like McFadden, greatest running back of all time. Greatest football player of all time in Arkansas. Like, just the way he is. Like he's just that level. But the thing about Alex Collins, though, and what made him so good is he didn't have like top-end, high-level speed. In a lot of cases, whenever he was getting, had a breakaway run, he's about to get caught from behind. You look back at that Texas Tech game or the game against LSU down in Baton Rouge, everything. It's not to say he was slow. It's just that wasn't what his strength was top-end speed. And he wasn't just great at like this built like a truck running guys over, anything. I have never seen anyone with the hips and the ability to never break stride when they maneuvered. Like that's what was crazy. If you just watch how he ran, it would be like a gliding type of thing. Where, most players, if they're trying to stop, if they're trying to juke or if they're trying to go a different direction, like they lose all their speed pretty much to try to do it and then they get tackled. But Alex Collins, man, he just knew how to work. He just knew how to go through and to, make guys miss when it seems like, they're expecting him to kind of slow down a little bit, and he didn't slow down. He never broke stride. But between that and, of course, his smile and the big hair and everything, he was a really iconic Razorback and was really a cool story, coming from South Florida and Miami and, having his mom take the NLI, National Letter of Intent papers on recruiting day. Like, it was just crazy. It was a crazy thing, but he went to Arkansas. He did great at Arkansas, and he always repped Arkansas forever. So really sad, though, that he, of course, had his untimely passing just a year ago, roughly. But still, 3 days away, folks. We're almost there. We're in the home stretch. We got this. Appreciate everybody listening in and watching into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Nabors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.